house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
You know, the only thing more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV.
Hey, what's going on? It's Ian back again for another episode of Native Film Talk. Today we had the pleasure of speaking to Charlene Teters. She was the focus of the documentary by Jay Rosenstein, In Whose Honor. It documents her time in 1989 being a graduate student and her coming up against the university as a whole and the portrayal of Native American, the Native American mascot, Chief Illiniwek, and her really opposition to that, which was contrary to the entire school. There were only 3 Native students at the time of her starting at the University of Illinois. She was working on her MFA, her Master's in Fine Arts. She was an art student, and she was trying to find a way to raise awareness around why Chief Illiniwek was a problem, why it was an issue, why it was a stereotypical portrayal, and why it should not be the face of the school, why it should not be what is the representation of the school. And Charlene goes into great detail around how deeply rooted this mascot was in the community and how it wasn't just the school. It was the town itself that had Native representation that bled into the local restaurants and bars and souvenirs and merchandise. And she talks a little bit about her art and how that influenced her art as she moved on. You know, after she graduated, she went back to go work for IAIA in Santa Fe and eventually became a professor. And then now she's a retired academic dean. So she's just newly retired as of this summer, I believe, and I had such a great conversation with her, and I hope you all enjoy it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming. I know we had a little bit of a brief talk before I hit record, but you want to just take a minute to introduce yourself? I would greatly appreciate that.
Sure. My name is Charlene Teters. I'm a member of the Spokane Nation in Washington State. And let's see, I'm very newly retired from my job at the Institute of American Indian Arts.
I saw that. Congratulations.
Long tenure there. I went there as a student back in 1984 to 86. It was a 2-year program then. And from there, and I was an older student, you know, when I went there. I had 2 young children with me as I was pursuing a degree in art. And then from there, I went to the College of Santa Fe, got my BFA. Then I was recruited to the University of Illinois, where I got my master's degree. And it's there that I became politicized. So the University of Illinois has as its mascot a dancing chief, so Chief Illiniwek. And I went there to work on my master's in painting. I was in the painting department, but after being there and kind of being in the midst of the struggle, you know, I started to do different work. You know, I was a painter and I started doing highly political, you know, installation pieces. I'm probably best known for my political installation pieces. So I have a body of work that is about the mascot issue in terms of my artwork. I was then the subject of a documentary that Jay Rosenstein did, you know, starting at the university that follows me to Washington, D.C. and some of the other struggles. So, you know, that's that work. And then I came back to IAIA to work as a staff person, and I think it was 92. So then I was a professor for about 17 years, and then the last 5 years there, I was the academic dean. So yeah, you know, I'm wise.
You've had it. Well, congratulations again on your retirement. So is that officially it for you? You think you'll just retire and pursue your self-interests, or do you have other plans to continue working in a different capacity?
Well, what I think I'll probably do, haven't, we've done a lot of traveling lately, so I've been trying to sort of deliberately be under the radar to just sort of experience some life, and that's been kind of great. But there's a lot of stuff going on in politics, and with the name changes, people were like definitely looking for me.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Kind of come back up for a little bit and touch base with everybody, but it's really interesting time periods that we're living in right now.
100% with COVID, the quarantine, with the name changes recently with the Redskins, and now the Cleveland Indians have moved over, and then also with Deb Haaland now being Secretary of the
I
Interior.
know, isn't that so great?
Yeah.
She texted me this morning,
That's amazing.
and that I stand on your shoulders, Charlene.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
It's just, it makes in my retirement years, beginning my retirement years, I'm really I have come across so many people that I have worked with, or and the work that I've done has inspired a new generation of leaders out there. So I'm really happy. Right now I'm feeling really hopeful about the future.
Well, you have a good reason to. You laid a great foundation. People like you and Deb are role models, for one, for not for Indian country, but also for everyone else. But I think more important, it takes it sounds terrible to say, kind of, but like you went through the struggle. We don't have to. So thank you so much for that, because watching that documentary again, I first saw it in 2004, 5, one of those 2 years in high school. My teacher showed it to me, who was a non-native teacher, but she was very her views very liberal, more so than the community. Her views were very she was like woke before woke was a thing, I guess it was given the term. And she showed us the documentary, and I didn't get it. Like, it just didn't register, like, because we did have a native mascot. It was the warrior, and it is a stereotypical image, but we had never experienced it to the degree that you did, where at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were only 3 native students while you were at University of Illinois. You were the minority of the minority. In my school, it was flipped. It was like 95 to 97% Native American, and the other kids that weren't, they were like the doctor's kids or the teacher's kids. And so there was no parading or masquerading of anything. And I want to ask you about, reservation schools and native schools, using that later. But I think it's something that I take my hat off to you, because it's not even something that native people completely agree on, is the issue of the mascot. So how do you combat that, or how did you get to a point where you just said, I'm set, and this is my message I'm going to push, despite the fact that even there's not like a unification of people around you?
Well, let me just say that I was like you. I didn't really get it either. I grew up, in the city of Spokane in Washington State, and in a time period where, pop culture was full of these stereotypes of Native people, and in fact, it was somewhat normalized. So. Cartoons had red-faced, big nose, buck teeth, broken feathers, slapping themselves in the face.
Right. Even just Looney Tunes. It was everything.
You could go to Nickelodeon. Well, I don't know if they play those anymore. So that was my life. That was cartoons on Saturday. Was there. It was kind of normalized. There was also other. Shows like F Troop. I don't know.
Oh my gosh, I just discovered that on this. There's a TV network called This, and F Troop just showed like 2 weeks ago. I'd never seen, and so F Troop plays like every other day, and I watch the episodes. I'm just like, oh my gosh,
it's really, really awful. It's kind of awful slapstick, and it really plays up all of the the pink cloud with the lusty busty. It's just really, but that's what I watched. That was my TV, so on
Mm-hmm.
Saturday, or whenever that came up, Troop, I watched it, as a kid. And I remember, so when you say I didn't get it, I understand that because I didn't really get it either.
Mm.
And it's so much part of all of our culture. You can see the Indian maiden that's on the butter and on other product labels. And, we had a museum that was it was an excellent museum. What was it called? Museum of, I forgot. It was about, the plateau. And in the gift shop, you could get the colored feather headdresses
Oh
and
my
all the stuff
gosh.
from Taiwan and so forth. So when you think about all of our experiences, we've all had that, so, it's, and when there was an awakening in 1970, the environmental movement. And then suddenly
Mm-hmm.
they realized, hey, wow, Indians are cool, and they were the first environmentalists. And
Yeah.
you had all of these kind of goofy,
Perpetuating a different stereotype at that point.
a
Right?
different way, kind of a over romanticized image
Mm-hmm.
of the crying Indian, and um, you know so there, we've had all of that. And in one way, when that romanticized Indian came up, I'm going like, yeah, that's right, and then we started wearing our hair in braids. And for my generation,
Uh-huh. Yep. No, I
that's
see.
where American Indian movement came up, kind of at the, during the 60s, the civil rights movement, to the environmental movement, then American Indian movement, basically here's a bunch of guys that had crew cuts, suddenly grew out their hair, were wearing braids and wearing jewelry, and, became super Indians, which we still see that now. We have people who discover they're Indian and then they become sort of super Indians, so, we have the whole range of stuff that we're trying to kind of undo and see. We are a people, we're not monolithic.
Mm-hmm.
We have the whole range of what it is to be a human being, but there are those things that are central to our cultural identity that is important. Just like any belief, there's a core to who we are as a cultural people, right?
I think for someone like you, it's because of where you are today and what you've done with your career up to this point. It blows my mind that you had to have an awakening.
Mhm.
Like to me, I would have just thought like Charlene was perfect from day one.
I was born that way.
Yeah, 100%. I was like, she was born an activist. She was born, a trailblazer. So it's refreshing to hear that. But it's unfortunate that we as Native people have to even have that awakening, because mine was I went to Dartmouth College and we used to have the Dartmouth Indian as our mascot. And even though when I had gotten there, it had been, 20, 30 years since it had been officially retired, every homecoming, when the alumni come back to campus, it comes back. And with a place like Dartmouth, and I'm sure with the University of Illinois, it's the same, where you have legacies. You have people that hand me down Letterman jackets, hand me down everything, school merchandise, school memorabilia. And then it always resurfaced, the Dartmouth Indian, that time of the year. And my freshman year of college, it was a massive deal uh, with one of the school newspapers, where we played Holy Cross and it just was blown into this big thing. And then the way that it was independent of the school, but it was related to the school, the Dartmouth Review, didn't like that we shut down one of their stations. They were selling T-shirts with the Dartmouth Indian on it.
Yeah.
And we, as a student group, we shut it down and made a big deal out of it, rightfully so, and had raised it to the level of the president of the college. And I think one of the subsequent issues of that paper, it had an old image of I don't know who it was. That it seemed like just a stereotypical artist rendering of a native running with a scalp, and then the headline was "The natives are getting restless," of like talking about the student body. And this was in 2006.
Yeah.
This isn't in 96, like where yours took place, or 86. This was in 2006. And while I came from a school where we had the warrior as our mascot, I never saw anything like that. And I never saw people react to it the way that they did, native and non-native. My native cohort, there was a lot of passion. There was a lot of tears. And for some, this was Groundhog Day. This was the fourth time they had gone through this because they were seniors, they were upperclassmen. And the emotion they had, the emotion they expressed, I'm just like, holy crap, this is a big problem. This is a big deal. That's when I had my awakening of like, this is not okay. And it sucks to have to like see your native brothers and sisters like cry and break down in front of you and talk about like, that's not a costume. That's not what that's for. Those are sacred, you know, and then outline it for you. And then you're on the other side of the table with all the non-native people getting educated. And you just feel like, what am I, what you have your own crisis, you know what I mean? And you went through that. Can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, your awakening and,
so you talked about, you know, my colleagues and myself. So I was recruited to the University of Illinois along with the other two colleagues. So, you know, Norman Akers, who's from the Osage Nation, and Marcus Emmerman, who is a Choctaw man.
Okay.
So the three of us were all we're first generation to get to pursue a master's in fine art. For us, that was a big deal. It's a big deal for our family and for our communities. We were first generation, had so much hope in our heart. And we made this journey across the country to Illinois, and it seemed like you know, like the other side of the world, you know, to make that journey there. And, you know, for us, it was a dream come true. It was a dream for our family, for our community. It was a dream.
Same. I can, yep.
That just turned into a nightmare almost overnight, because we're there on the campus and we're feeling pretty good about ourselves, like, hey, we made it.
Right.
And then we're going around campus, we're going places. We go to the bank and there's like these caricatures of the Indians, you know, on the front. There's wallpaper at Wendy's, you know, that has all the caricature of the Indians. And then we started to, you know, because the first couple of weeks of any university is there's all of the introductions to the traditions of your school, right? Mm-hmm. So, and it was fraternities, sororities had their own events, and there was the Miss Illini Squaw contest that one of the sororities, they were dressed up as the lusty busty babe,
oh my gosh,
like Pink Cloud. And, you know, they were doing car washes and stuff in their gear. And the sorority brothers would put on their paper headdresses to go to the bar. There was a bar called Home of the Drinking Illini.
Oh, God.
Had a falling down drunken Indian. So it was a neon sign where he would fall down over and over again. So it was
oh my gosh, really? That was the loop the entire time the establishment was open. Just a neon sign of the
neon sign in front of the bar would just fall. He would fall down drunk, you know, over and over again.
Oh my gosh.
Big nose, you know, the crosses in his eyes, his feather was broken and he was falling down over and over again. That's where the fraternity brothers would put on their headdresses and then go and they would act out their negative stereotypes of our men, you know, our native men. So they're drinking and we're witnessing this within the first couple of weeks. And I was there with my family, so we had a home. We at least had a safe place to be, right? And Norman had a little apartment off campus, so he had a place where it was at least, you know, his safe place. Marcus lived in like a dormitory type setting. And so he had to, there was no time where he was not dealing with this crap. It was going on all around him all the time. He flipped out. He wrote a letter to the newspaper. That's how it started. And he said, and it was, you know, I've read it and I've looked at it. It looked pretty, you know, decently, you know, he was not belligerent. You know, he was criticizing the use of the mascot. And so he became targeted by the community who, you know, sought him out, found his phone number, and his
Oh
phone
my
would not
gosh.
stop ringing. It was like hateful, becoming increasingly more violent, but I didn't know
And
that
that's just from a letter.
just from a letter to the student newspaper.
Oh
So
my
he
gosh.
got so angry one night after enduring this that he went and graffitied our, because we were in the master's program,
Hmm.
graffitied the studios. And we're going like, what happened to Marcus? We're going like, what happened? So we didn't know that he was being he couldn't sleep. He couldn't leave the safety of his room without people going like, woo,
Oh God.
and shit like that. So we didn't know. And then one of the professors that recruited us, he, broke the news to Norman and me this way. He goes, Marcus left in the middle of the night. He was on campus like 2 weeks.
Oh God.
So think about how much hope in his heart he had.
Mhm.
We were there and it was crushed.
Same exact thing happened to us. We lost students because of that. And Dartmouth, a lot of them being first generation too, the native students, this is like a crowning achievement for a family of just like, you're the first person to leave the res and you're not just leaving, you're going to an Ivy League institution. This is great. And then 3 months later, you come back with your bag saying, I can't go back to that place because of how it makes me feel.
The kind of harassment that he put up,
That is insane.
Dealing with, and you think about, okay, but it's like they won't leave you alone.
Mm-hmm.
It was like white noise, that just would not leave him alone. And that professor that recruited the three of us, he goes, Marcus left in the middle of the night, and he goes, 1 little, 2 little, 3 little.
Oh God.
And he goes,
and this is the person that recruited you.
Yeah, and he goes, 2 Indians left. And he starts laughing. For us though, that was the first pain, because we were going like, we knew what it took for him to be there. And that nursery rhyme is about trivializing the genocide of our people. And then there are no Indians left.
You know what's interesting about that? My grandmother, so my Nellie taught me that nursery rhyme because she was taught that in boarding school. And my grandma, full blood Navajo, born and raised on the res, didn't know anything different. I know that nursery rhyme from my grandma, and I'm sure she doesn't know the context around it. Maybe she does now, but something like that, like you could be holding on to something as your own tradition, not fully understanding the context around that. And I think when it comes to native mascots in our own communities and us adopting it at the college level and pro sport level, we're certainly doing that, unfortunately. And then we do shoot ourselves in our own foot when we get to a point where someone like you, who's an activist, who is a founding member of organizations and coalitions to combat this, when the other side of the table can say, well, I know a native person and they said they don't have a problem with it. And unfortunately, that kind of squashes a lot of our progress.
Well, it's really common. That's how they'll go out of their way to find that native person who will, have, hey, I have no problem. I'm a Redskins fan, man. So it's a common tactic, and we should understand that that's the mechanics of racism, and that's how it operates within our community and outside. Because if you can get the people to accept these things, wear the Redskin hat, and adopt all of these things that don't come from us, then isn't cultural genocide complete?
100%. You hit it right on the head. I want to go back to you talking about your classmate Marcus. So after hearing what happened to Marcus, your department chair, the person that recruited you, somebody doing the 1 little 2 little 3 little Indians thing, to me, that would make me cower in my shell more after the basketball game incident. But instead, I mean, you had, an emotional breakdown with your kids. And I have a 1.5-year-old son. That's our first kid. So I think a part of that is just growing up and experiencing life. Once you saw, I think maybe you on your own would have had a different skin, like thickness to your skin. But because your kids were there and they were reacting, I can only imagine what that feels like.
Well,
And that I like, to me, the gall that you have to go in front of the basketball arena after that, after hearing about Marcus from a letter, you stood in front of a basketball arena, like openly protesting, openly talking about the issues, and you were probably by yourself for most of it, for a lot of it in the early stages. Like, what kept you going back or standing out there in the
well,
cold?
so just the incident that I just described happened, and then he followed up, meaning the professor that recruited us said, "You can't do anything about this, so keep your mouth shut,
Oh,
get your
geez.
degree, and get out of here." That's what he said, which is what a lot of advice will help. When Native people, once you start to learn your own history, because we're all in different stages of reclaiming our own um, birthright, our culture, our stories, our names for us, that's our birthright. Um, we're all in different stages. Some are pretty advanced, pretty progressive, and some are still struggling with just trying to untangle all of the different misinformation that's out there about us. So I did try to keep my mouth shut. I'm going like, and Norman, we both, eventually we're going like, well, what are we going to do? We're two Indians on this campus of 50,000, mostly very, very elite white students. What can we do? He's right. What can we do? We'll try to keep our mouth shut. And that's what a lot of people do. We will internalize stuff like, yeah, they're idiots, internalize it. But when you internalize it, it does hurt you. Eventually it starts to eat away at you, at your soul, We were getting really damaged. Norman and I, we started drinking a lot. We started, we were going, it was bad. I started to get better once I stood out there. Once I stood out there and faced it, I became better. So, and if I was there alone, I probably would have just internalized it and not said a whole lot. But I was there with my kids. And it was when I witnessed them become so embarrassed by the mascot that I'm going like, I can't work this hard to instill a sense of pride in my children. This is who you are. These are the things that are central to our cultural identity, and see it like dashed, by the activities of the community, because they witnessed the same thing I did. So that's what made me go out in front of the stadium and hold a pitiful sign that said the American Indians are human beings, not mascots. And it's like, I probably should have spent a little more time on that sign if I was, because I was in the art department. I could have done a better job.
I never made that connection. You could have totally made a much better sign.
I could have made a better sign. But, I really thought, I'm just going to do it this one time. It's for them. It's for my kids, and I thought that would be it. But see, what happened is that the same hateful community that came out and targeted Norman or Marcus targeted me. So my phone started to ring day and night, becoming more hateful. Some of them becoming very, very sexually suggestive, in its violence.
I think that's what made my jaw drop to the floor, that you still persisted, because I like to think that I could stand in front of my son and take however many lashings the world can give if I can prevent it from getting to him. When it started hitting your answering machine, like there's no running away from it for your kids. At some point they're going to hear it. Even if you tell them to go to the other room, like they're just going to know what's happening.
They did hear it. They heard it, and they were impacted by it. And it was only much later that I realized how much it impacted them. I mean, obviously I thought, well, they're just embarrassed, because I was like in the press all the time, but I was the butt of the joke, I was the butt of, so the community will use whatever they have at their, in their hands, in their control to target people. And I was targeted by media. There was a lot of really bad press about me, trying to make me look ridiculous. Even on the radio station, which they would listen to, where I happened to be the subject of the hour where they would be making fun of me.
Jeez.
And they would hear it. And I remember them running in like, Mom, they're talking about you. You have to, make them stop. And I heard it and I'm going like, oh, I'm pissed, so I'm calling them, because, my kids are listening to this. I want you to stop this, so it was like, there was no safe place. Even in our home, it wasn't safe.
What gave you there's so many words I want to use. Courage is the one that comes to mind, but it doesn't give like courage, determination, just like the not give a shit to a certain point, I guess. So like, what made you stay and finish there? You could have gone to any other university. Like, what made you stay and finish at the University of Illinois, despite all of this?
I did actually think about quitting, so when I first started to take my stand and the kind of result that was happening and all the media that was really negative, I'm going like, well, okay, so I've just sacrificed my my student status here.
Mm-hmm.
So I might as well just keep going because it's already gone.
Oh.
So I started to get other phone calls. So because it jumped from our local press to the national, it went to the New York Times. And there was a guy who was doing a study called Bigotry on Campuses. His name is Kenneth Stearns from the American Jewish Committee. So he's an expert on anti-Semitism,
I see.
at racism and hate against, Jewish people. So he was doing this study. So he was monitoring student newspapers, but what brought his attention to it was the New York Times. He lives in New York, and he goes, "Wow, okay, this is a pretty good example of what happens when racism becomes institutionalized." So he called me in the middle of the hate calls that I was getting. So and so they all start the same. Is this Charlene Teters? Yeah. Well, and then the hate
and then they lay into you.
Yeah. And so he calls, "Is this Charlene Teters?" Yeah. I'm getting ready for it. He goes, "This is Kenneth Stearns," and he introduced himself. He tells me what he's doing. He goes, "It sounds like you need some help." And I'm going like, "Oh my God, yes." I need some help. And he was the one. I says, here's what's happening. People are driving by my house. Not only am I getting the hate calls, people are driving by my house. People are leaving things on my porch. People are, my son got picked up by the police and they didn't do anything. They just brought him home.
Oh gosh.
Like they're trying to tell you they know where I live, so that the police.
And when you hear stuff like this, you think of like lynching in Alabama in the movies. You think of like the 50s and 60s. This is in 1989. Probably into the 1990. That is crazy. And so you are the only one too. Well, one of two at this point. But on your street where you live, like it's just you and your kids. Like I can't imagine the terror. Like you would. I'm surprised you could sleep.
It was meant to be terrorizing, and I said, I feel like I probably need to leave. So I'm telling Ken Stearns this, and he goes. His answer was not what I thought he was going to say. He pauses for a while and he goes, "Well, if you leave, they win."
Wow, good for him to say that.
He goes, "If you leave, they win." He goes, "I know that you need help." He says, "I can use my platform." So he had contacts in Chicago. He started to write editorials. He started to use his platform, because he was connected to Chicago and New York, the American Jewish Committee. So it was the beginning of some of this other side of the perspective. And he was able to write about it in ways that I've never thought about racism.
Mm-hmm.
And the mechanics of racism, because all other groups have also dealt with these stereotypes, because Jewish people also, in order to kill them, you had to do the same thing to them. So he was able to write about it in ways that I couldn't even think about it, because
Mm-hmm.
he was just this was his area of expertise. And he made it really clear. He did a number of written columns and stuff like that really helped me to, put it into words in terms of, what this was doing to an entire group of people. So that was him. And then also, do you know Tim Gallego?
That sounds very familiar. No, I don't think so.
Tim Gallego was the editor of Indian Country Today.
Okay. Yep.
So he formed that newspaper, and then he sold it, I think, to the Oneidas, and
Mm-hmm.
he's now has, I think he's like founded like 3 different newspapers. So because he kept thinking he was going to retire, and then he didn't like retirement, and he'd form another paper. And then he'd, so anyway, he, still writes
Mm-hmm.
editorials about this whole mascot issue, because he was like dealing with it like 10 years before me.
Mm.
So, Tim Gallego, you could just go look, he might even be a nice next cast. Because his history is even like 10 years longer than me. So he calls me, and here it goes. Is this Charlene Teters? Yes.
Just holding your breath, waiting for it, right?
And then Tim goes, "This is Tim Gallego," and he goes, "I've been dealing with that mascot for 10 years.
Wow.
What can I do to help you?" Because this guy, the legend about this mascot is that the person who was selected would go to Lakota country, learn the dances and all that kind of crap, became part of the mythology around this whole mascot. And he goes, "I've been dealing with this for 10 years, writing about it. What can I do to help you?" So he starts writing editorials about it, and he publishes it in his newspaper, which also gets national syndication. So there's probably a book of the ones that he did trying to help me. Because and he still does it. He still brings up, he's really very knowledgeable, because he can go like 10 years before me.
So what do you think that is? That's an interesting piece that was in the documentary. So thank you, that was good insight, because they just touch on it in the documentary, that the school had made efforts, I don't know what efforts it was, to be authentic about the dances, even though, I don't know, and then they would flip-flop saying it's not a real, native tribe that we're representing, and then on the other side they were like, well, it's authentic because we go and research these things, and we go and we try to honor you. And what you have a quote from your documentary that you appeared in, False Traditions, False Idols. You have a quote about, if you say it's so trivial when I bring my concern to you, why is it so trivial? Why isn't it trivial when I go back to you and say, well, change it? Like, so where is that reluctance to get over that? I mean, you say power, you mentioned power at certain instances in that documentary, but I feel like it's power, but more than that.
Oh yeah. It is more than that. And I went to the university to get a master's in fine art. If I was like getting a master's in sociology or some other kind of field, I could probably write a whole thesis about some of this, because this whole idea of mascotting came around about the same time period across the country. It's like 1925-ish, when they thought Native people were going to disappear. I mean, they always referred to the vanishing American with the beaten, broken down, bent over on his horse, Indian.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the vanishing American, they really thought that we were going to disappear. That, if there were people still alive, that we were going to be assimilated into the dominant culture. And so there would be no more culturally, connected Native people. Well, we do see some of our people who are almost completely assimilated.
Mm-hmm.
They may be connected by blood, but they're not very connected any other
Oh,
way.
100%. Right.
So,
Right.
that's what they thought was going to happen to all of us. So they're, in the 1925s, they thought, they started to regret that the noble Indian was going to disappear. That anybody who's still alive would just be Americans, right?
So
So
a lot of that was in film, though. A lot of that guilt came from film of like, oh, we're actually doing something real to these people. They're not all gone. They're still here, and we still have effects on that. So what do you think the effects of like film and television have on the mascot representation and vice versa? Because they're obviously very connected.
yeah, well, they're both sides of the same coin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they invented this sort of romanticized Indian, the
Yep.
the noble Indian. They invented that. That's why I said that in a way, is that they created this image. And what stands in the way of them, completely being able to embrace that identity is those of us who are still alive and we're still culturally connected to our communities.
Mm-hmm.
We're the ones that stand in the way. That's why they hate us so much. They're kind of like, because we're going like, wait a minute. No. So
I think, this is where I wish we still had someone, people like Vine Deloria Jr. and John Trudell around, because this is that piece of like, they've forgotten what it means to be human in regards to connection to the other. So they glom onto things like this that can be a arm into that piece of who they used to be. And I think that there's an aspect of that that's why there's such a fascination with movies like Dances with Wolves and Avatar, of like being accepted and reconnected back to days that are beyond them, days that are far beyond behind them. And Indigenous people in this country can be that connection. 23andMe can be that connection. DNA tests can be that connection again.
I found out I'm Indian. Hey.
Yeah. I swear that the amount of people that even that they don't, non-native people don't register when they come up to me knowing I'm Navajo, knowing I'm from the reservation. Hey, Ian, I found out I'm 2, 3, 4% Native American. Where can I find out if I'm, yeah, exactly. Where can I, find out if I'm eligible for some checks?
No. Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's a whole issue, but
here's the deal. Here I was on this campus. I was the pariah of the community, but they do think about Indians a couple times of the year. So Thanksgiving and Columbus Day, usually, those are the two times they think, oh yeah, wait, especially on Thanksgiving. Here I am, the pariah of the community, but on Thanksgiving, I'd suddenly get all these invitations to people's houses for dinner. And I'm going like, what? Yeah.
It's like, tomorrow we'll go back to throwing stuff at your house, but today.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we need to, it's craziness. It's just like so bizarre. So, but I did, the reason I think it started to, once I kind of, I'm already sacrificed my student status. I decided I'm going to make them push me out.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, so there were efforts to try to push me out, and there was I started to have small protests. This, with the pitiful sign was the first one. But
if I could interrupt you really quick, so for the people that are listening, this issue, if you haven't seen In Whose Honor documentary, this issue wasn't just in the community. It wasn't students. It wasn't just faculty. It was all the way up to the board of trustees, where they were like, Charlene Teters is a problem. Anybody who is on her side of the fence is a problem. And there's no issue. We're honoring you. And so these smaller protests, I'm sure you were getting heat from all the way to the top. Because the board of trustees, that's everyone's boss, on campus. So they're at that point trying to protect their employment. So they're probably coming at you with like, you need to stop now. And like, not just beating around the bush. They're like, I could lose my job if you don't stop because I was told to make you stop.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I obviously didn't stop and started to, develop I was really, really shy, I have to say. When I first went there, I was really shy. So I should probably step back and just tell you how hard it was to stand with my little
Mm-hmm.
pitiful. I would hyperventilate if there was more than 10 people in the room. I was
Wow.
really, really shy. But, through this, sometimes you find yourself in a place where you have to address it, right? So that's what I was doing there. But people started to come forward. So I have already told you about Ken Stearns and Tim Gallego. Then people from the American Indian movement reached out because they started to hear about my struggle there. But one person who really turned it around for me is Kwame Ture.
Mm.
You might know him as Stokely Carmichael.
Yeah. Okay.
So Black Power, right?
Yep.
Power. He's the one that coined that phrase. So he came to campus, it was like 1989. And he actually, I didn't know this, when the BIA, or when the American Indian movement took over the BIA building in Washington, D.C. in the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
the Black Panthers came out to support them. So that was when he
Wow.
first became kind of connected with Native people. So here Kwame Ture comes to campus, and he asked to meet with student leaders. And so he was
He
one
went
of
to
those,
a predominantly white school and
yeah.
just
Yeah. But there was 2,000 Black students there, so
oh,
relatively, when you talk about 50,000, still a drop.
that's a significant population though.
That's pretty good. So he was invited by, them to come and speak to this campus. He heard about this issue through Vernon Belcourt, the American Indian movement. He says, "Hey, there's this woman over there doing this stuff. Here's all the articles on her. So he was briefed before he came. He asked to meet with student leaders. So Kwame was wearing his African regalia,
Mm-hmm.
sitting at the table, and he asked to meet. This is before he gives a talk, and there's like 1,000 people filling up the auditorium. And so we're behind the curtains, and he's meeting, and it's all Black students except for me. And so I'm hyperventilating. I'm just like, okay. When you hyperventilate, you have to remember to breathe and talk at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, because I usually would forget to breathe, So I was the last one, because there was like a group of, and they're all very powerful. Like, I'm so-and-so from the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and I'm from this organization. They all went around, and they're all just really
Mm-hmm.
like that. And I'm going like, my name is Charlene Teters.
Oh.
And my voice kind of trails because I'm running out of air. And he turns to me and he goes, "I know you. I have heard about you. My friend Wabuna Nini has told me about you." And that's Vernon Belcourt of the American Indian Movement.
Mm-hmm.
And then he turns to the other students who brought him to campus, and he says, "I want you to give the sister 10 minutes of my time," he says.
Wow.
And I'm going like, "No, I can't do it." I'm going like, "I can't do it. I can't do it," So they're all watching this interaction between Kwame Ture and me. And I try to convince him I can't do this. And he says, "If not you,
Who?
then who?
Right.
If not you, then somebody else from the Native community. If not you, then who?" And I realize I have to do this. I'm terrified, but this was the beginning of it turning around, on this campus. So this was 1989. I speak before him. So I get up there, and there's like 1,000 people.
Oh gosh.
And I have my little piece of paper, and it's like, I'm just like, you could probably hear the paper.
You just jackhammering up there.
And my knees were going like this. I was so
Mhm.
terrified. But, when you have to do it, sometimes it comes from somewhere, because I put my paper down, I closed my eyes, and I just started talking. And when I opened my eyes, I had a standing ovation. And people asked me, "Well, what did you say?" I really have no idea.
Oh wow.
it's like I blanked out,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that the ancestors do their work through you. I really do believe that. I think that's a moment where the ancestors did their work through me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I turned around, Kwame stood up and embraced me.
Wow.
And it was like on the front page above the fold, Kwame going like this, embracing me.
Wow.
The
I bet you had the support of every student in attendance at that. Yeah. What's I mean after that?
After that, they're going like, okay, we didn't get it before. Sorry, we're going to be there with you now. So it was because Kwame, with his power,
validated your struggle. Yeah.
made it because he used the platform. He goes, if this is an issue for Native American people, then this is an issue for you. And he's talking to his community.
Good for him.
He's going like, if this is an issue, if you consider yourself an anti-racist, if you consider yourself an anti-racist, this is your issue too. So it was like, they're going like, whoa, okay, sorry, we didn't get it before. So
well,
it's the dynamics on this campus.
I think that's so important too for us to go across lines, whether it's Black Lives Matter or No DAPL, for us to go across, racial boundaries and just say it's an issue, exactly what he said. It's an anti-racism issue. We need to be supporting each other. And with, Black Lives Matter, No DAPL, I was so proud to see the support from everybody, having allies from all across the board. What I didn't quite see, I still don't quite see that with the mascot issue, with representation, because it's sports. People are very, for lack of a better word, very tribal about their sports because that's their sense of community. That's their sense of place. Yeah, it really is. So to go to that, I mean, there's an untapped, it's going to start at the pro level and then go to college. In this instance, it was kind of the college and the pro were kind of like playing hot potato and who's going to deal with the issue. But at the high school ranks, I read an article that said 95% of all Native imagery and Native mascots are at the high school level, not at the college and the pro level. So what do you think needs to happen for, roots to take hold at that level, at the high school level?
Boy, that's a struggle. It's happening. We have some really courageous community members out there doing this hard work, but this is a hard nut to crack.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you that on my res, we're the Redskins.
Really?
We're the Redskins. It's like they are going through a 12-step program of separating themselves from it, because at first it used to have on the front of the, home of the Redskins. And then finally that got painted over. And then it got sort of removed from stuff. They don't wear it on their uniforms anymore, but it's still there, kind of under, it's like they can't and that again came about, I don't know what time period that particular one came about.
It's we have the same thing. So we have a school on our reservation that's the Redskins, and it's the same exact logo as the Washington one. And when when the Redskins came and played the Cardinals, he went and invited that entire school, or at least a number of students, to a football game. And who's gonna say no? I mean, these kids, it's probably their first time ever going to a Cardinals game, and they're going to have like the best seats in the house. They're going to get it catered, everything. What school's going to say, no, we're actually, going to stand on our moral high ground and say no? It's like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. An owner of a football team is inviting you to a football game, despite the fact that he's using it for political gain, and to say like, oh, these Redskins are okay with it. Why aren't you okay with ours? I think it's so hard with I can't even imagine, for me, I'm open in that I don't wear anything from my high school. That's just my form of, resistance, form of protest. And I try to educate my family on it. But my whole family, they were Tuba City Warriors, so it's so hard to say like, oh yeah, there's a problem with that. There's something wrong with that. There's a lot of pride around that name in my community. So to say there's something wrong with the name, the mascot, I think is sacrilegious. Goes back to your religion standpoint, your religion point.
Kind of a struggle. I know on my res, I'm now that I'm retired, I'm gonna be moving back. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico right now.
Uh-huh.
But it's like, oh, good, we can deal with this here. And I'm going like, no, don't make me do it.
I just want to be home.
I just want to be home. but Billy Mills came to our, he visited my res.
Okay.
And he was invited to our school, to the high school, and he gave a talk to in the auditorium to our Spokane kids in that auditorium. And here they are, it's like home of the Redskins. And they wanted to give him T-shirts that had the Redskin logo on it.
Wow.
Because they had the same logo. They didn't even try to change it. And he's like, I'm going to politely not, and I'm not going to accept it. I'm telling you, Charlene Teters, she's my hero. I'm going to support
wow.
her. He's going like, so he used his platform to basically to try to teach. And he goes, she's a warrior. You have people that you could lift up. You don't have to hang on to these things that don't even come from our community. So it's a real struggle, and it was uncomfortable, but they sat and they listened, and there were some people who were changed by it, but not everybody. Everybody's going like, oh, her. No.
Oh gosh. Well, for what it's worth, as everyone goes through their awakening, and I think it's so powerful what you said, of everyone is in the process of finding themselves again, because of everybody's lineage, where we are, whether we were removed from our reservation or left there, or whatever our family's experience were with residential schools, boarding schools, relocation programs, language, if we chose to hold on to our language, our culture. Like, it's such a spectrum where every Native person is. Just because I was a Navajo from Tuba City doesn't mean the trailer next door to me was in the same place as me, and I think that's such a bizarre phenomenon with Native people in Indian country. And I think that's sort of a piece that I'm having to come to terms with, because I'm like, it just makes sense now, as an adult with a child, 15 years removed from seeing In Whose Honor the first time, I can say it makes sense. But it took that 15 years. It took me to go to college to have to see how it affected my friends, my best friends, my cohort. I had to see that in person. I had to see that firsthand to have that awakening, and then start that healing process and rediscovering. And it really is like a 12-step program, like you said, because your first stage is acceptance. If you don't know there's a problem, you can be blue
Exactly.
tell someone, they're not gonna accept that the issue exists.
Yeah. Well, I can be much more, I can laugh about it. There were a time where this was very painful for me to talk about, and it was really,
I'm sure.
But now I can I can be a little more lax about it. But my kids were definitely impacted by their time at the university, because they were in junior high and high school when they were there. Junior high and high school is difficult when everything is just fine. But to be in the middle of the what I was dealing with, and with the community, with how they treated us, they were. I'm surprised they came through it okay.
Wow.
At the time, my son, is an alcoholic, and it was sort of the beginning of, he was in high school then, the beginning of a very kind of destructive behavior. He's sober now, but that was really difficult for him. And my daughter, who's an epidemiologist now, she's like this big brain. She's like amazing. But she told me when she was there that she was very close to suicide, So, these are things that I had no idea how much they were also impacted by, what they had to go through there. They have their own stories that they can't actually talk about. I've talked about it so much that I can. They still get very tearful when they talk about that time period. So I wish that they didn't experience that, but they have become these powerful people because they did.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, gosh, that in itself proves that I mean, one, representation matters. For people that say it's inconsequential, I think in Indian country, something that I when I first started trying to talk about this issue, every person would tell me, like, why are you spending your time on that when there's more important issues? You know, and that's kind of when they triage the problems in Indian country. They're like, native mascots is down here. We need, you know, we have food insecurity. We need water rights. We have land rights to worry about. We're talking about a mascot. It's like, yeah, but I think those affect like the day to day. But to minimize the contributions of the struggle and plight of our people, to say that it's not important, I think is
well, they're all connected. You know, they want to triage it and say, you know, but when you dehumanize a people, then you can disregard our tribal leadership because we're definitely full human beings.
It's a fantastic point, right?
And when you dehumanize a people, then you can desecrate their graves because they're not human beings. You know, when you dehumanize a people and it's done so publicly, then our children wonder, what's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they doing this to me on national TV? You know, so the dehumanization is connected to all of those issues that you're talking about. You know, that we're not full human beings. You know, they want to take our resources, our land, our water. You know, they don't see us as full-fledged human beings. It's all connected.
Man, you spoke like that was written on page, like you just read that off from a book. That was great. Thank you for making that connection. That's something that I'm going to hold on to moving forward, because I still plan on, you know, advocate. Part of the reason why you're here is because I'm a huge fan of everything you've done, and I hold you in the such highest regards. And it's amazing to me that someone like Deb Holland's like, I stand on the shoulders of you, Charlene. Like, that's insane. Like I can only, that's for another day, you know, for another conversation. But it's just a testament to your work, your determination, your willingness to stand up when everyone else was saying, no, it's not the right time. Or if, you know, but you said, if not me, then who? And I think in going into 2021, that's a message that everyone can hold on to and just say, yeah, if not me, then who? Well, whatever it is. So thank you so much for everything you've done and continue to do. And I wish you the best in retirement, and I wish you the best going home.
Yes. hopefully it all goes okay. I'll let you know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charlene.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Wow. I had a great time talking with Charlene. She is a force. She is a trailblazer. She is everything that I really expected, but more, because I didn't expect her to be so shy, as she explained. For some reason, I always envisioned her being this finished product, this person that just got it from day one. But she didn't. She went through an evolution. She eventually got to a point where, hey, native mascots is wrong. Hey, F Troop. Hey, TV shows, movies, Disney, Looney Tunes. This is all messed up. This is, you know, they have it wrong. They have representation wrong. We can all have that awakening. We can all get to that point where we have that awareness finally, where we kind of get the blinders removed and we're like, oh, okay, I see this for what it really is, and we should probably do something about this. And Charlene was the epitome of don't talk about it, be about it. She went out there in the freezing cold in front of basketball games at University of Illinois, in front of football games at the Washington Redskins, and here we are. Names getting changed left and right. We got Cleveland going down, we have Washington going down, and it's phenomenal to see. I can't believe it. I had such a great time talking to her, and I hope you all enjoyed the episode. Talk to you later.